did you bring with you today on this incredible conversation on chapter events, deciding on in-person, hybrid, or virtual? Now, as always, I'll just mention this as folks are coming in the door and finding a comfortable seat, having their incredible beverage of choice in front of them, is we always do record our webinars. And so we will record this webinar so that we are able to share this with you afterwards. It is a great, I'm seeing so many people I know. Hi, Lisa. Lisa, hi, Sarah. Awesome. Ways to keep hybrid expenses down for AV. Okay, well, we're going to talk a little bit about some hybrids that might help with that. Yes, chapters are dealing with increased competition between themselves and the wonderful office we call HQ. So, hey, Troy from Long Beach, great to see you. Listen, Troy, if you've got advice, since you're from the CVB about hybrid events, we've got questions coming, so make sure your fingers are ready to go. Yes, a checklist on things. So Susan, delighted to share with you that we have a cool checklist today. So we've got some good stuff. All right. I see that we've got quite a few people that are already in the door and have found their seats. So I'm going to suggest that we get started. All right. So, of course, today's conversation is brought to you by your dynamic duo of Billhighway and Mariner. We work together to bring, well, frankly, whatever topics it is that you're asking us to do some research and some talk to the community about, bringing those to you. We are focused, and as many of you know, we brought you a CEX and continue to bring you the CEX experience through these webinars. So absolutely delighted to have you here. What I just want to mention, you know, sometimes folks will say to us, so tell me a little bit more about it. And you know, we don't talk about ourselves during these particular webinars because this is really our opportunity to bring content to you. However, I did say to Sarah and her team, so what's the question that you can answer? And she said, who is and isn't coming to my chapter events? And I said to Peter, what question can we answer? And we said, what do chapter volunteers need to know? We're both open, obviously, to help you with either of those questions. But let's get to today. We asked you guys, what do you want to talk about? And a resounding reply was, can we go in person yet? Or a variation of that is, how do I not do virtual anymore? So we did our own research to find out what kinds of ideas, suggestions, checklists would be really valuable for us to give. So the agenda today is to cover all these questions, and we got a rapid fire webinar to talk about what are the key questions that your chapter should be asking, what are considerations, maybe there are some variations on the hybrid, obviously to give you a couple of examples, and of course at the very end is some takeaways and resources, and that will be sent to you so you do not have to scribble down all of those at the very end. Real quickly, just so you know, please right now while you've got your computers open, save that date for May 26th when we will be talking about chapter benchmarking. All right, so to get us started, let's start with you as opposed to your chapters. When is your chapter leader conference in 2021? And are you planning virtual, hybrid, or in person? Because part of what we have to do is model really good learning opportunities for our chapter leaders. So let's talk a little bit about what you guys are doing. I'm super excited, Shelley. We're going to be doing a great fun thing, aren't we? Anyway, so start talking about this. And if you're doing hybrid, give us a little bit more intel into that, because the hybrid is a big conversation for all of us, and it'll be really wonderful for us to share some of those ideas. All right. The key questions we asked to get this content going was, should chapters plan on in-person events and meetings this year? Can chapters provide a safe experience? And of course, are members ready? And is hybrid a viable option? Now, somebody's already mentioned in chat that how do you reduce the cost of that? And that is one of the two reasons why hybrid in and of itself can be really difficult. The cost, and it's a bigger volunteer lift. So we talked with an expert. Some of you may know Aaron Wolwick from CEX. He was one of our Masters of Ceremonies. He is an incredible expert, a certified facilitator, but he does meetings, and he's done a lot of meetings around virtual, around in-person, around that blend. So we tapped into him. So a lot of what we're going to share today comes from his intel and the work that he's done to reopen Michigan and create safe meeting spaces in Michigan. But I also twisted the arm of Peter Halstel, my extraordinary partner, because he's done so many events. And I've asked him to be here for us so that he can chat with you guys in the chat, talking about some of the questions that you have, and of course, pipe in with some examples. Peter, say hi to everyone.
Hi to everyone.
There we go. Awesome. That's all I needed you to do. All right, so let me go ahead and find out a few things about you. I'm going to start with the question is, what is in your chapters mix this year? So what I mean by that is, what if chapters told you, are they going to go in person? Are they going to go virtual, hybrid, or you're not sure yet? Now, it's really interesting because, I mean, we absolutely know that some states are already open, and we do know that some chapters are already back to in person, but we also know that those are the exceptions. And so part of what we have to do is we're going to be multitasking, right? Supporting our chapters that can be in person. And I see so far about 40-ish% of you guys said you've got some chapters that are being in person, while optimizing the virtual and beginning to explore the hybrid. So let me give you just a few more moments here. I'm seeing a lot of folks, of course, are still doing virtual. Now, this was a multiple choice question because we know your chapters are different. All right, give it just another second or two and let me share with you what your folks are saying. So obviously sharing virtual is an important part. Hybrid, people are starting to talk about hybrid, and I think that's going to be a real cool conversation for us to have, and some are in person. But, and this is the reason why we're here today, a whole lot of folks aren't sure yet. All right. Let me go to another question for us. I'm going to ask you, what is your role, headquarters role in the chapter's decision? Are you completely hands off? Are you just about giving advice and recommendations? Do you set policies that chapters must follow? I know, for example, that RAPs, the regulatory affairs professionals, they have said to their chapters, because everybody's under the same meeting insurance, they said, no in person. So I know there are some organizations that do set policies, and then there are other organizations that are completely hands off. So we wanted to find out kind of where you guys are in the stream of things. And I see from what's coming through right now that a fair number of you are in that middle place. If you are checking that you set policies that chapters must follow, do us a favor in chat and share just a little bit about that policy. If you've already created some good advice or recommendations on doing whatever makes sense for the organization, please also share those in the chat. Remember, guys, in the chat, we share it afterwards. So we love to have you guys sharing resources that allow us to continue the conversation. But anyway, 72% of you said you're really just in the advice role. All right. So as I mentioned, the question that we gave to Aaron was, what's the outlook for chapter events in 2021? And Aaron came back and he said, well, there are a couple of things that we all want to consider. We want to consider, not is the state open necessarily, although that has to be part of our consideration. It does mean that we have to begin asking questions like, even if the state is open, when will your chapter's constituents get access to the vaccine, for example? So yes, you want to follow the state rules, but you want to get a little bit deeper, because sometimes a state opening is not the same as an employer allowing an opening. And then the very important thing is, can you do safe meetings? And that is what the resource at the bottom of the page is all about, is safe meetings in Michigan, is really saying, what's your venue safety protocols? And if you are used to doing activities in smaller venues that may not be formal, say a person's office, what are the safety protocols even for that building? It's real important that we begin to ask, we start with, is the state open? We had to follow that. But we then really need to drive down to what is the access and what is the safety protocols? So what we were suggesting, and Aaron strongly suggested, he said, this is his advice to national associations and small associations, is you got to go to the members. The most important thing is to start with the members. And he offered three bits of advice for really exploring the connection to the employment, because that's going to be a huge part. Will the employer permit people to attend professional events? Are they providing education and travel budgets, right? Will they require employees to quarantine after attending events? Really important that you actually ask the members and don't let the board dictate the answer, but really allow the members to give you that insight. And the other element to think about is, in general, is your trade or profession already out and about? Because there is from some associations, there's a culture which is already embedded in getting back into person. There's a drive to get back into person, maybe there are first responders or some essential workers. So it's really understanding the culture. So don't look around and say, well, what other organizations are meeting? Look inside at your own culture and say, what's important to us specifically.
So Peggy,
No,
quick question
yes.
for folks before we move away from that last slide. One of the interesting questions we heard in a conversation with a group we're working with a couple days ago was, to what extent are the members concerned about the carbon footprint of an in-person meeting? And I suspect this is going to be an issue that's going to get more salience as time goes by, and climate change and all the issues associated with that get more attention. So I'm just curious, among our audience, have you heard that question? Are people beginning to ask it? If so, have you found a way to respond to it?
Right.
So to what extent are they concerned about getting in a car, train, plane, et cetera? And not only that, but using hotels, all the other actions associated with an in-person meeting. Right. And the carbon consequence.
And Peter, it was interesting you should say that, because I was talking to one of our other folks, and they went out and they asked their members, and to your point, 7 out of 10 members who responded. Now they've gotten more people in their virtual meetings than they have had pre-COVID in their face-to-face meetings. But 7 in 10 said that they are happy because of the footprint, because of all these other things. They're happy to stay virtual in 21 and possibly even into 22. So you're absolutely right. There's a lot of things that are going into people's decisions. The interesting thing is, and Peter and I talked about this a lot, because we're home to 2 small associations, and like many of your chapters, one of our groups is driven by the revenue that comes in for their annual meeting. We punted last year. We just made the decision to go virtual, but we were sitting here thinking, well, the vaccines are out there. And our particular, and most of our guys they're going to have access. Many of them work in government procurement, government agencies. They're going to have access. So do we go ahead and open it up? Well, here's the thing, and this is where the conversation with Aaron around the decision time frame really impacted what we decided. You see, early decision allows us to optimize the event. And so by pivoting early and just saying, we're not going to wait any longer, we're going to make it the best virtual event, we've been able to invest more time and energy into it and do more intentional planning. And that proper planning is critical, particularly because, quite frankly, people gave us the benefit of the doubt early on. They are not looking for us. They're not looking for us to screw up our virtual meetings anymore. So we have to make sure we have that time. So Aaron said, as he's looking across the country, and someone said, yeah, a lot of folks are, states are opening up. Aaron said, if you want to take the guesswork out of it, the best cautious plan is to suggest to our chapters that certainly Q4 of 2021 is going to be good for many of us, maybe Q3. But if you want to avoid the hiccups, you want to avoid the poor attendee experience, go safely. So then we said to him, okay, well, great. So you've given us a decision. You've given us the questions to ask. So hybrid? What are our choices, kind of thing? And Aaron gave us some really good points. And I'm going to share these points in two buckets, because what he talked about was helping our chapter leaders really identify the goals. And it really begins with, before you talk about the event, it's the intention. Peter and I were talking about this the other day. And Peter, I don't know if you want to jump in here, but we talked about the intention. And I love the way you said this. You said, Peggy, what's the intention? Is it education? Is it networking? Is it outreach? Do you want to add anything to that, Peter? Because I love the way you then translated that to, if it is education, then you can look at virtual. If it's the networking that happens, the in-person. If there's a hybrid, it's the hybrid. Unmute yourself so you can join us.
The question I always ask is, if we're trying to teach people something, do we need to have an event to do it? And so if it's simply a matter of disseminating information, then I would tend to stay away from creating the lift of an in-person event. If we're trying to address the important cultural, social elements of education, which are enhanced by in-person or virtual, where you have a chance to see each other, I would say let's create an event. So I think that issue of intent is not just a matter of intent; it's a matter of what's the process that's going to be most effective for that intention.
Right. I love that combination of your intent guides your process. And then, guys, when you say that, well, okay, we could do this either way, you have to identify the goals. And Aaron said this very clearly. He said, understand that they're not going to be the same goals if you're going in person or virtual. Even if it's a hybrid, there's going to still be different goals. So make sure that you really are understanding the differences in the goals, and then look to see where there is overlap. And that's going to help you if you're doing a hybrid event. It's going to help you prioritize the various experience elements that you're going to do. So ask the intention. Allow that to help inform the process. Is it in person? Is it virtual? Can it be hybrid? Identify those goals. If you're going to thinking about going hybrid, where do they overlap, so that you can put the priorities on the experiential elements that are going to be important. It also allows you to play around with some things, and then let the goals. So if you're looking at this from the chapter's perspective, what does that look like? Well, so maybe the chapter goal is, well, we really want to make the event accessible to all. So our intention is an event that is accessible to all. And maybe the goal is further that we want to provide opportunities for networking and discussion. And then you begin to say, okay, so what other goals do we have? Maybe it's to connect attendees to learning cohorts before, during, or after. Maybe it's to continue the learning experience. As you look at these chapter goals, you can begin to identify where there is either overlap. And so I'm going to do a little bit of a hybrid, and we're going to talk about those second 2 points there. The second 2 points there in just a moment with some examples. But at this point, it helps your chapter leaders to say, when will it make sense for me to move everything to an in-person, and then how do I have to do that? Or let's leave it virtual, and what are the impacts around, say, for example, networking and discussions? Sometimes this comes clear when we give you some examples. And so we're going to get into some of those examples to show you how this thought process works. But first, I want to sort of say a caveat. I think all of us know this, but I'm not sure chapter leaders know this. And that is the copy and paste does not work. Forget it. You can easily fall into this idea. If I did this over here, I'm going to throw it right over here. You wind up, well, people have less experience for what I would say the low tech the low tech experience, less tolerance for that low tech experience. So we really need to be careful about that. And the other thing is, you just to say I'm going to take, and this is the copy and paste. Well, I'm just going to stream this speaker just right over here. Well, it's a passive viewing experience. Why would you stream a speaker to a passive audience when you really ought to be thinking about those other learning elements or experience? And again, it goes back to that attendee experience. All right. So let's say we want to play with some hybrid options. Okay. Now, what I'm getting at here is, at the end of the day, the problem with hybrid, no, I shouldn't say problem, let's say challenge. The challenge with hybrid is that it does take good technology if you're going to do a full-on hybrid event, the way many of us have this sort of vision to it. And secondly, it creates a big lift for your volunteers. And so we said to Aaron, we said, but people want to get together in person. So how do we look at this differently? If we don't have all of the high tech gizmos, what can we do to make it to sort of mimic the hybrid, but allow it to be something that our chapter leaders could actually pull off? He gave us two ideas. One is this notion of planning things into what he calls the rapid succession learning. So what he means is it's a alternative plan that takes the traditional and adds in this case, a traditional virtual, and adds some smaller in-person workshops. So actually, AACE, one of a great friend of ours who we've done some volunteer work and some other things, I'm looking forward to their conference, which is coming up. They're going to do a virtual conference, but they were supposed to be in Boston. So after the virtual conference, they're going to have some small workshops in Boston. So what this might look like, and this is where you can become partners with your chapters. What if you guys had a really cool virtual event, maybe an annual meeting that you guys are doing, and then you help your chapters do in-person workshops, maybe the following week, maybe it's day 1, 2, 3. The point being is it's kind of like a 1-2 punch that you've got here. And so it doesn't require all the technology lift, but it does allow your chapter to give that in-person feel as you take a deeper dive into the programming. So the other element that was really kind of cool that he talked about is this idea of integrating the audiences or bridging the two events. So what he talked about here is you have the virtual group get together, and the work that they do forms the learning or forms the agenda or forms the follow-up work to an audience that is getting together in person. So it's kind of like lots of creative work here, and then the in-person is putting it into an application. So there are two audiences, but one audience is developing and helping and creating, and the second audience is taking it to the next level. So let me give you an example of how we're doing this in kind of a virtual way. I'm working with the School Nutrition Association, and day 1 is going to all be what I'm calling strategy, new way of thinking. We're going to be talking about member experience and some really cool, take that definition bigger. And then the next day, it's all application. So you could do this kind of integrating the audiences, and maybe there are some folks that are in both places. So again, it's thinking a little bit differently about how do I bring those two things together. So let me give you some examples though of some low tech and some other hybrid events. So I love this one from Inns of the Court. It was so successful for the first chapter that did this that other chapters have mimicked it, if you will. So members were invited to attend either in person in a socially distant space or via Zoom, and the socially distant space happened to be the back patio of a member's home. They used a pop-up screen, a video projector, a really inexpensive video camera, a tripod, and an external unit. And then they sent mails through Grubhub to the one location and to the folks at home. So it gave them a real opportunity to provide an experience that brought people together, that felt safe, but it didn't exclude anyone. You can get more information on this. Billhighway is putting in some really cool links on that. The point is, it was so successful that they're going to offer the options of going forward. So think about this, how this kind of a learning example may be able to solve your chapter board meeting and other business meetings over time. So we ran into the fabulous Jill Murphy, and I don't know if I've seen her on here yet or not. I know she had a conflict today, but we had a chance to chat with her about one of her professions. So this was the Hybrid Industry Day in Panama City, Florida. Now, the really cool thing here is that they had a professional AV. So I was going to say high end. Well, they're pretty much high end, right? So basically what they did was they went to a hotel, they set up the main room in the hotel. They had a professional AV that was able to, and I believe it was PSAV, who was able to assure that the streaming content that was live streamed would be as powerful as possible. They also had some recorded information. Now, a couple of the cool things that made this really work: name badges that indicate if someone was okay with closer conversations or give me full distance. Limited in person to 60. Had boxed lunches for those protocols, took those rounds down to 3 to 4, centralized the speakers in one location so they had control over the tech. Now, they did a couple of little things, like all questions read into a microphone. They were just like, this is how we're going to do this. So they put the protocols up, and then they had help in being able to develop it. They did in-person guidelines, attendee waiver form, all those kinds of things. And they made sure they had ample moderators for questions. So the best tip that they said, that this chapter came back, it was wildly successful, did all the revenue goals, did all of the attendance goals. And they said, build the price to pay for professional AV. So someone said blue sky. Some of this might be difficult. But if the pricing is right, and if people see the pricing as paying for something that's valuable. I love this example because this was adding technology to another level. WOVA, and many of you, I think, have heard of that. This is an example, and it can work lots of different ways. This was the Submarine Institute of Australia. So again, one stage shot production crew. They used video live, which was embedded into an app, which allowed remote attendees to watch and engage. Everything was on the WOVA mobile app. Attendees were able to participate in live polling as well as session chats. And it featured, to make everybody feel like they had an integrated experience. Some folks were in person, some folks were remote, and they had remote panelists with small TVs with the in-person folks. So again, they did a lot of good technology. My point to all of this and showing all of this is, you have the Inns of the Court, which was low tech, and it was a business meeting, but it added to the networking. It brought value. You had the same, which was a smaller chapter event, but they built the pricing to that. And then you have something that's a little bit larger where they integrate it with an app. The question we have is, we've got chapters of all different sizes. And so it's really important that we say, here are 3 examples. What's in your bandwidth? What's going to make a difference for you? How can I create this experience? But you show them this experience. And if it's beyond them, then you say, well, how do you create little learning cohorts? How do you create follow-up discussions? How do you do walk and talk? So, more and more people are just putting their earphones in, taking their phones, going for a walk while they have a group conversation. Make sure that you share these stories, right? So one of the cool things that Aaron said to us at the end of the day, when the chapter leader is trying to decide where they want to do they want to invest in doing a hybrid? Do they, he said, have them draft the email finding out someone at the event tested positive for COVID. Go them through this little exercise. If they're not comfortable with it, then coach them to stay with virtual where they are, and then help them do the best possible virtual activity. I love, Diane just put that one of the chapters offered colored rubbered wristbands, red if you're not comfortable with approach or contact, yellow if you like social distancing, and green if you're comfortable with anything. Take that home, give that as an example. Yes, Wes, a great idea. So every chapter faces the same challenges, I think, right? So our question as CRPs is, what can we do to help them really connect with and find the answers they need? I think it starts with a couple of key things. First of all, you're on this call, right? So, and you will get the slides, and you will get the chat, and you will get the video. So go ahead, be a curator, share information that is relevant, important. Just lift stuff from this. And we're going to show you something from Jill Murphy in just a moment, which she said, yes, steal. It's yours to steal. Prepare the toolkit, the Safe Meetings Toolkit. Give them information. Lots of the stuff in here you can begin to use. And do yourself a favor. Give them a crisis communications plan. I saw Lisa Coster on the attendee list. A good PR person can walk you through a crisis communications plan. And there's probably some cool templates that anyone, so connect with your PR, say Maryland, or whatever chapter you've got, right? And then develop those templates. Now, speaking of templates, here's the item that I love that Jill did. And she said, steal away. So what they did is they created a risk assessment tool and in-person guidelines. And we've got both of them to share with you. But here's what she said. Let's say you're going to have a holiday social. Are there any restrictions above a certain size that would not allow this event to proceed? And then there's a yes, no. And then each of the yes, no's takes them through the decision process. This is an amazing tool that helped. It's super simple. How can you modify this that would make it easy for folks? Remember, our volunteers are very, very busy. So then she said, this next part is, as you look at your scores, there's risk mitigation, and then you're able to figure out what is the risk level for it, and then you can put a risk communication strategy together.
A quick question for the audience. Has anyone had a conversation with their liability insurance carrier regarding risk associated with having an in-person event? And if so, what did you hear?
So yeah, put that in the chatter box there, please.
Yeah.
So Billhighway is posting the risk assessment thing and the face-to-face meeting guidance, both from Jill. Thank you, Jill. So, steal these, take it back, and then modify it to fit your needs. And maybe you take that risk that we just showed and you add the couple of elements around hybrid, right? All right. At the end of the day, we're going to suggest to you that one of the best things you can do is help your chapter leaders do two things. One is to level up the virtual events, and two is to adapt to the technology. Let's talk about the virtual events. So I know you guys have done some training. It's time now to think about that training. Is there a refresher on it? But then how do you take it the next level? Can you actually curate examples and give them updated information or give them new ideas, train them on new ideas? So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Powerful panels. So this is a great article, and I'm sure Sarah will drop this in here. Aaron said, he reminded us that the novelty of virtual events is past. Members are done it. So how can we do it differently? There's a lot of people doing some pretty incredible things. This was the National Speakers Association, and they intentionally designed this for their audience. So it was a lot of fun. So here's what made this panel extraordinary. The panelists were ready to battle. So it was not just I'm going to talk to you, and then Peter's going to talk to you, and then Sarah's going to talk to you. The moderator was really vibrant, engaging, there and instigating, needling them. The questions were very fluid. They included the virtual audience throughout the entire time. Though on the other hand, they trained their speakers, because they were trained speakers. It was easy to do, a little less easy maybe for us, to be concise. They had an incredible AV team, and they let the AV team be the tech crew there and to say, no, don't do that, move over here. And of course, high comfort level. And the main reason why it worked was it wasn't another boring panel. So take this example, take it to your chapter leader. Say, if you're gonna still be doing your virtual events through the middle of this year, through the third quarter of this year, let's ramp it up a notch or two. And when we ramp it up a notch or two, let's make sure that we put into place the things that are going to make it useful. So for example, many of you have monthly chapter leader chats or something like that. What if the next chapter leader chat was an extraordinary panel, right? Show them how to do it, then train them. All right. So the second thing that we want to talk to you about is collect the stories. Peer-to-peer learning is powerful. And sometimes when Peter and I are doing a chapter leader conference and we'll share ideas, the share ideas you share, we'll share them to the other chapter leaders. And they'll say, but that's not our chapter. Soon as I point out something that they have done themselves, all of a sudden, there's a greater willingness to accept it. So do the work. And I have to just put a shine of light on the CAI, on community associations. I don't know if someone's on the call right now, but what I loved about this was that what they did was they used their chapter calls to really share in a meetup kind of format what chapters were trying. Then they took those learnings, they published the meetup recordings to the chapter library, and some cases they shared the conversation with permission, of course, to the community writ large. I love what HSMAI, Jenny Thiessen over there is doing this year. They put the kibosh on their traditional chapter leaders awards program. It's happening tomorrow night. What they did instead was they told all the chapters to simply submit something that went really right. What was one really good thing that you did? She gave them a really quick, give us 3 slides. The first slide is the challenge or the opportunity you were trying to meet. What was your objective? The second one was, what were the results? And the third one was any photos or videos that they could share. They now have an awesome collection of great ideas that they're going to be able to share. So whether you follow the CAI and you do chapter leader meetups to pull it all out and then package it to share it, or you do it in the context of sharing through a chapter leaders awards program, go ahead and be the collector, be the clearinghouse. And finally is this idea of technology. So we are getting tired of Zoom. Who isn't just a little bit fatigued from Zoom? Jenny and I were talking earlier today about her upcoming leader conference. And we were talking about, because we were on a phone, we were on an old-fashioned phone call and having a brilliant conversation without being on this whole video thing. And she said, she prefers Teams now. And we were talking about technology. And I said, well, I've done a number of what I will call traditional phone calls, and I get to pace. So I get to walk, and talk. And of course, my Fitbit likes that. So yes, we want to get off of tech, but we also want to try some new tech. And so the point of this particular note that Aaron really pushed us to make sure that we shared is this idea of take the time now to explore, particularly as we're looking at this whole conversation around hybrid. I was thinking about this earlier today. Um, we had to, on a dime, go virtual. Right now, we have this incredible opportunity to pause, to think strategically, just by using the questions we talked about earlier, to think strategically, to learn how to use the technology to build hybrid events and build the next virtual events, and then build even better in-person events. We have the opportunity. So there's lots of different things. I don't know how many people, well, actually, we've got a poll. Let's find out who has used technology. And I'm going to bring that poll up. So out of curiosity, have you guys used any proximity chat platforms? Maybe it's Remo, it's Wonder, it's Gather, maybe it's something else. Jenny's using Remo for her leader conference next week. I can't wait to be part of that and experience that. The interesting thing about the proximity conversation is that it really encourages or permits, encourages, allows you to take the learning to a new level. And part of the really cool thing about taking to the new level is we're going to continue some level of virtual. So let's get really good at it. Let's make it be something that's very useful. I'm loving it. People are putting in some very cool spatial chat. Love it. That's an explanation in case you're wondering about the question. Pathable Slack channel. Lots and lots of cool things. Well, let me show you. Most of you are not using this yet, but we do have some talented people for Remo, Wonder, Gather, and Other. So if you use Remo, Wonder, Gather, or Other, or any of the other ones like Spatial Chat, raise your virtual hand in chat, and let's let you guys be able to talk to each other about how you've used it and where it would fit in, and then how can you share this with your chapter leaders. What we're really trying to do is recognize and embrace, just as I said to you that the other associations said 7 and 10 are happy to stay on virtual, is if we want to pivot to actually having people really pay, and our chapters are struggling with that, right? They've done free events and now they need to get some money in the door. Up the ante on the virtual event, and people will pay to come in. So let's do some investment in that technology. So speaking of technology, sort of not, okay, let's talk about how you can, just mention the proximity chats. All of these are about adding another layer of engagement and learning experience. So I love this. This is actually, the title of this actually comes from a, surprisingly, it comes from another article. I usually call them swag boxes, right? But apparently there's a whole name for them, and I love it because it reminds us of why we want to use engagement boxes. What are engagement boxes? Engagement boxes are this. NIGP has the Growing Closer Virtually. In there, we gave them a journal, and in this journal, we've given them the matching Post-it notes. And throughout the process, they are collecting on these Post-it notes and then organizing them. We gave them, of course, lots of some tchotchkes. It's because we have a coffee mug day. But we also gave them some real practical things like a touchless thermometer, because they are going to go back to in-person events and they want to be able to have some of the things that they need. So, and there's lots of opportunities for them. And we put a couple of supply materials in there. So an engagement box is a hands-on box that adds the tactile. It allows us folks to reflect and remember. So for example, hot chocolate for our team meeting this week is a really wonderful way for us to get people to really think about the richness of of chocolate and combine the chocolate with this experience of the team meeting and a good conversation. But the engagement box also allows you to rest your eyes. I really loved, and I don't remember, I was at an event that Aaron did, and we brought this to CEX, and I had a chance to use it a couple of times. And then one of my very favorite webinar folks that I did, she did this. She told us at one point, we had a worksheet. She said, turn the video off. For the next 2 minutes, I want you to reflect on what we've talked about, and I want you to do the question on the worksheet. When you have this engagement boxes, you're able to do that. So anyway, it's also physical reminders on the desk. And of course, remind them the mementos of the learning experience. And lastly, it makes your course, your chapter's course, different from all the other ones they can go to. So Peter and I should say Peter is doing this, but we have MRN's conference in June. And one of the things that we're building right now is an engagement box, because we really want to enhance the learning that our folks are going to be able to have in this experience. Lots of virtual meetings, and we want them to realize that our virtual meeting is the one for them to put their money in. All righty. So I understand, and I can see from the chat that, you know, a lot of folks are really, at the end of the day, and we did that one poll, at the end of the day, we're in the position of giving advice. So I wanted to just give you a couple of last minute thoughts. If you've got whatever the event insurance, provide advice that they check their event insurance. You can check your own event insurance if it's important. Bring to them experts. Bring in your attorney, your insurance agent, to help craft waivers and guidelines. You know, Jill went to their attorney and they said, listen, we just need to have some good waivers and some good guidelines. Really interesting. I think I saw Diana on the call today from NAOP. I know she brought in their chief marketing person, and she brought in some other specialists to talk with the chapter leaders to help them navigate some of the important questions. And I don't know, Diana, if you could throw in the chat if I got that right, sort of help us. Make sure that they understand where to look for the common sense, the local ordinance, and how to interpret that. Sometimes there's a whole question about one of the ordinances in Maryland, and there was the press didn't do a great job of explaining it. And so what I really liked was you found the right sites and you could know. So give them the advice on how to understand even things like ordinances. The other thing that this came from a chapter leader, noticing that many of her members were going to stay remote. And so they had a number of members that had some unused spaces. And what was really cool is they're beginning to put together their hybrid events, and they're going to be tapping into pretty high-tech conference rooms, several of them in the area. So I love this one. Is sometimes with the hotel and you're not sure and you have some concerns about the clauses, et cetera. Well, try Peerspace. We've had a couple of people say that Peerspace has given them leads on some good spaces for smaller events that makes a difference. And finally, one of the things that we're going to constantly look at is this hybrid idea. And the question is, can you provide some advice? And maybe this is more than advice, some support. Can you maybe bring in the speaker via some really good tech and have the chapters create small in-person meetings following all the social distancing protocols? So there's lots of ways I think that we can make a difference, and we can be present and helpful to our chapter leaders. I want to pause for a moment and see what other advice and ideas you guys would add to the conversation that we've been having. And Peter, any additional thoughts? And I'm going to flash up as he's coming on. We've got some resources, and all of these links will be sent to you. Go ahead, Peter.
I think we've heard lots of great ideas today. There's not much I would add to that. I think one of the, there are a couple of strategic trends I think we want to keep an eye on. And this comes out of a class we just put on for one of our management clients in the appraisal space. And they were talking about what kinds of homes people are building and what kind of office space people are using. And there were some surprising numbers that came out of that conversation. One, a fairly major General Electric office anticipates, I can't remember, that about 50% of their employees are expected to stay virtual. And as people get more comfortable with, and quite frankly, happier with not getting in the car and looking at brake lights, I think that's going to change a lot of their expectations about traveling generally. And we need to, we're not going to replace or eliminate in-person activity, but I would be surprised if we don't see a significant drop in the demand for in-person. And so that, I think from a scaling perspective, we need to think about that. But the other interesting opportunity, and Peggy and I have talked about this before, is we found a lot of organizations finding individuals come out of the woodwork whom they have never seen before at their events, but they're coming out of the woodwork and attending their virtual activities. So I think this gives us that the hybrid model, if we can scale the in-person part appropriately so the math works, actually is going to allow us to reach a far larger portion of our membership than we ever did before.
Absolutely agreed to that. And I'm reading the chat, Peter, as you're talking. And what I love about it is there's a number of people who are ramping up on the technology side, which can help us do exactly that. I noticed here that I guess it's Desiree was saying a number of times that she uses broadcasting Zoom. And I think that we have some folks in this room, this virtual room, who have tried some really cool things, and maybe we'll pull together a panel and have everybody share what they know, if that's of interest to folks here. And we can do it maybe as a series of quick little video chats that we can get out to the community faster. So if you are interested, if you've tried some technology, or if you've got a chapter that's done something really cool in the hybrid space, do me a favor and ping the panelists, and then we'll see if we can get you on the phone and learn a little bit more about this.
I think one of the other opportunities that associations have now that they didn't necessarily have before is the ability to produce some real high-end education. And they can afford to pay for a much more expensive presenter, much more high quality, high production value technology, and allow the chapters simply to get together physically to watch that, whatever that presentation may be, and interact with it in some way, shape, or form. But more importantly, then have the opportunity to talk about what they've just seen to each other in person or virtually. But I think that that's a way in which you can have a true symbiotic partnership between the chapters and the headquarters, where you're upping their game in essence. So when people come to an event, they know they're going to see somebody who's really good, really knows their stuff, and then they get a chance to really talk about and understand and process what they just heard with their peers.
Yeah. And, Peter, Carmen mentioned earlier in the conversation about getting speakers as a consideration too, as we're looking at in person. And that is going to be a fact, guys, is that some speakers are not going to want to travel or will not be able to travel, but that doesn't make them not the perfect speaker. And right. So as Peter is saying, if you can be the catalyst for that, if you can be the catalyst for getting that speaker and working with them in a way that really optimizes their speaking ability. So maybe you've got a series of faculty members that are doing some really cool training. And because I know a number of associations, we train our faculty to teach our courses out in the field, right? So maybe you have a couple that are really good and you pull them and you train them how to be really good on Zoom or WebEx or whatever. You invest in that, right? Now you can make them available to chapters. And if the chapters want to have these small in-person meetings like Peter was talking about, you can provide, okay, and here's a set of questions to run those conversations. So you might need to do that anyway for speakers. And really what we're talking about at this point is how do you really jump on or optimize that?
To build on that, Peggy, I think the other opportunities lies in the ability of the organization to bring voices to the chapters that they otherwise could not afford to have in the room. So, for example, with the Maryland Recycling Network, everybody wanted to hear from a guy named David Alloway out on the West Coast, because his recycling program is doing phenomenal things, but we couldn't afford to fly him out, but we could afford to get him on Zoom. And I think that's where the ability to really tap into resources that were otherwise inaccessible is phenomenally different. But it's, how do we make sure that the chapters have access to those resources and can take advantage of that?
So I'm seeing in here, several people, and one person said, yes, and they're competing. Our virtual events are competing with the HQ events. Yep. So here's the interesting part to this, is that we've always had some competition, but at least they were on the ground, right? Now we've ramped it up. Here is our opportunity to embrace and collaborate potentially in a way that we haven't done that before. How do we create that partnership? So how do we create the, hey guys, we're going to get the speaker, and someone said, yeah, you have to train your speakers. Yeah, we're going to train the speaker to give the best learning experience. Then you're going to have the event, but we're going to have a little quid pro quo, and we're going to open it up to a larger audience. This is also where you can say to a chapter, okay, we understand you want to get full bandwidth, but what we'd love you to do is open up registration to your chapter members, and then gradually open up. So stage that opening so it's not a direct competition. When you guys say, let's be together on this, it's going to make a world of difference. And I know that, I think I saw Wes on here. One of the things that Wes at RAPS did early in the pandemic was they just let their chapters to do, and if I get this wrong, Wes, correct me, the chapters could do whatever event they went. Now they went a little crazy because they had all these events, but what made it work was the fact that the chapters were doing what I would call the 100 series. And what RAPS offered for pay to its members, well, what I would be calling the 300 level services. So it's great. Oh, good. I got it right, Wes. So basically the strategy was anybody that wants the hour version of this, and then there was the, hey, come buy the whole thing. So the whole idea here is, this is our opportunity. Even if they're separately independent, this is our opportunity. And the last thing is, one of the things that we talked about, and what have I got timing here? I got 2 minutes left, Peter. And you probably don't have a lot of time, but Peter interviewed Phil Foden from AGC, and just in 60 seconds, talk about how that collaboration between chapters happened.
So Phil actually did this presentation at the CEX last fall. And what he did was they put together a program that they were going to deliver virtually. And the first time they went out with it, they sold out, and they found that about a third of the people who attended were from outside of their chapter. And this was a 40-hour program that cost $1,500 per person. That was not 40 hours straight. It was over several weeks, but it was an expensive program. It was one that everybody wanted. They sold out, and he ended out saying, look, I'm going to send a rebate back to all the chapters whose members attended of $300. And so he actually brought them into the game, and they ran it out again and had a similar sort of breakdown. And they actually became partners with their fellow chapters instead of becoming competitors, and instead of cannibalizing. And I think if we help our chapter leaders and ourselves, because I think that sometimes the headquarters are too territorial as well. If we really look at this as a collaborative ecosystem, we can find a way to make this a win-win-win.
Yeah. So the action item there very likely is pull all of your chapters together and say, we're in this together. let's talk about how we can create a calendar that is shared across the system and makes a difference for all of us. We have come to the end of the hour, but we are not the end of the content, obviously. And if you raised your hand and we're open for us doing a video chat so we can share some of the ideas, please raise your hand. Really, really, really want to support you guys in all of this. And you know, I want you to know that we are here for you. You can tap us to, you know, just, and you know, it's just pick up the phone. You know, we love to chat. If we can help you take a look at any of this stuff and put it in some context, we just want to be able to be there for you to do that. So, oh my gosh, Peter, thank you very much for joining me on this panelist opportunity here. Peter's going to be front and center in May as we talk about chapter benchmarking and how we can use it to drive change for our chapters. And a big, huge thank you. Sarah always stays hidden behind the video screen, but we wouldn't be here without Sarah and her team. Thank you for Aaron, and thank you for, of course, Deirdre Reed, who actually was the person who interviewed Aaron and brought all of his good ideas here. What a fabulous conversation with you guys today. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Reach out to us if we can do anything for you. Tell us what topics you want. It's been great.
See you guys.